all they care about is pleasing their own desires. Of course, sexually monogamous, heterosexual marriage-based cultures display the highest level of cultural creativity and energy. There's a reason why the most loudest cheerleaders for abortion are fat and ugly. They've become what they've beheld for years. They've celebrated, cheered, worshipped at the altar of abortion. If you behold absolute insane, unmoored sexual appetite, you will become an absolute insane, sexually carnivorous, hungry demon. Total or near total sexual freedom always means cultural collapse. Did you know that? Civilizations die at the hands of sexual chaos. What is sexual freedom then? Well, look at America. Unfortunately, sodomy, pervasive pornography, sexualization of children, radical abortion normalization, sexual freedom, right? A study of 86 civilizations over 5,000 years found a positive correlation between the cultural achievement of a civilization and the sexual restraint they observe. Wow, shocker. The evidence shows that in the entirety of human history, there's not a single instance of a group retaining its culture after it has adopted sexual freedom. I just finished researching this topic, and I'm so curious what you will think of this episode. My research blew my mind. I want you to put in the comments what you think. YouTube, Rumble, wherever you watch. Let us know what you think about this episode. Send us your thoughts and research. I'm always blown away by how well researched and knowledgeable our audience is here. Let us know. Give us a rating and review. Let us know what you think. Hit 5 stars on iTunes podcast or Spotify and write in a little review. I read all those. I really appreciate it, but it helps the show climb the charts. Follow us on Rumble, where free speech lives, in case YouTube digitally assassinates this show again for some obscure reason to try to silence us. And join us at the White Rose Resistance by going to thewhiterose.life, thewhiterose.life, and become an ally of the White Rose Resistance at $35 a month or $70 a month. We call that air support. Or Spitfire, $140 a month. And you'll get your battle box. You'll join our book club. And you can even stream our film, The 1916 Project, on our White Rose app. But I would encourage you to go to Daily Wire Plus. That's right. The 1916 Project is going to be streaming soon on Daily Wire. We just announced this last week. Daily Wire Plus. That's Ben Shapiro, Michael Knowles, Matt Walsh, the whole crew. The 1916 Project is finally streaming online at Daily Wire Plus. But you can also bring this to your church. You can host a church screening by going to the1916project.com. Support us as we establish and launch resistance chapters across the country to make the local church great again. Thewhiterose.life. Let's get into it. This is the Seth Gruber Show. So a society cannot be sexually liberated and free and also endure. Meaning sexually free, like, a laissez-faire sex attitude, like anything goes, there shouldn't be laws against any kind of sex stuff, live and let live, man. You can't have that kind of society and also endure. You cannot have laissez-faire sex and also have culturally creative energy, meaning like a lively society, something that produces a cultural drive to build, to innovate, to provide solutions, to create things that are beautiful. You cannot have both. Total or near total sexual freedom always means cultural collapse. It means dead civilizations. Don't take my word for it. This has actually been observed for quite some time. There's this fascinating book written by J.D. Unwin in 1934, so 91 years ago. And it's called Sex and Culture. And what's fascinating about it is J.D. Unwin does not provide his opinions. He doesn't provide cultural commentary. It's not a philosophical piece. It's observational. It's his study, okay, of 86 civilizations over a 5,000-year period of history. And he found a positive correlation between the cultural achievement of a people and the sexual restraint they observe. The evidence is that human societies, he said, are free to choose either to display great energy or to enjoy sexual freedom. It appears that they cannot do both for more than one generation. He says the whole of human history does not contain a single instance of a group becoming civilized unless it has been absolutely monogamous. Nor is there any example of a group retaining its culture after it has adopted less rigorous customs. I mean, there have been many attempts, because it's 91 years ago he wrote it, right? To poke holes in it, to discredit it. And people haven't been able to do that because it's incredibly well researched and documented, and it's purely observation. That's why history is a, expletive. History sucks when you're a radical leftist sexual libertinist. Because it indicts your ideology and revolution today. I mean, everyone knows the famous Churchill quote, those who forget their history are doomed to repeat it, right? Chesterton says the disadvantage of men not knowing the past is that they do not know the present. History is a hill or high point of vantage from which alone a man sees the town in which he lives or the age in which he is living. That's why radical revolutionaries always rewrite history, or they censor, cancel works that are damaging to their current political revolution. This conversation that you and I are having together, what we're going to talk about today, is damning to our current sex culture and should encourage and inspire you to stand for what is true, good, and beautiful. We are reaching a breaking point. Yes, I will venture to be prophetic. We don't have much time left. If we continue down the current, quite well-treaded path of sexual libertinism, there will be a precipice. This is not a path that we can continue down in perpetuity. There is a cultural cliff. And when societies go off that cultural cliff, they can't and don't climb back out. They're simply taken over. Now, J.D. Unwin, in his book Sex and Culture, written in 1934, does not answer the question of why. He's not commentating. He's merely an observer and a researcher. But the facts are there. It's for you and me to discover the why. Why is it that when a society becomes sexually liberated or free, that continues, it becomes a dead civilization. It has no cultural energy. You can't build or produce anything. I'd like to take a stab at the beginning of an answer to the why. And this is so important for the moment we find ourselves in 2025 with fourth trimester abortions, sexually mutilating minors. I mean, how many hundreds of thousands of children are missing right now because of the sex trafficking industry, sex slavery, AI trans furry porn, virtual reality bestiality? I mean, like, it's hard. It's hard to picture how we could be more sexually liberated. We don't have that much time left, actually, is sort of my dark doomsday warning. I don't try to traffic in that for its own sake. Like, Like, I actually believe this, like, and I hope you do too. Let me get into it. George Gilder, is sort of interesting author. He speaks of man's fallen nature, and this is a little bit hyperbolic. I'm not fully on board with every aspect of this quote, but it is the beginning of an answer, and I want to read it to you. He says, "Men are by nature violent, sexually predatory, and irresponsible. Men lust, but they know not what for. They wander and lose track of the goal. They fight and compete, but they forget the prize. They spread seed, but they spurn the seasons of growth. They chase power and glory, but miss the meaning of life." There's a lot of true things there, right? I don't think that men are by nature 100% sexually predatory and irresponsible. I think that we have light and dark in us. Now, that's not to say that there's anything redemptive in and of ourselves. Even our righteousness is as filthy rags to Christ, to the Father. But like, even, when Jesus says, like, even you, though are evil, know how to give good gifts to your children. You know how to love them. That's what I mean, right? We have light and dark in us. We have a fallen nature. I think George Gilder takes it a little bit too far, but his description of men's journey is self-evidently true. Men were created to lust. They were created to rule, to exercise power. They were created to be victorious. They were created to go on adventures and journeys, right? You think of the men who built the West. You think of the pioneers coming out to the West. Like, those things are innate, okay? And when put in their right context, when pointed at the right target, men are very powerful for good, right? But left alone, especially lazy and feeding our vices, we do start to look, unfortunately, similar to what George Gilder describes. But when men are in a heterosexual, monogamous, permanent marital union, the whole formula changes. And I know it's like we're kind of like going back to basics here, but in a society that has lost its mind, going back to the basics is exactly what we need to do. Okay. Of course, it's like maybe you are decades long Christian and you're like, we get it, Seth. It's all in Genesis 1-3. But applying that to our cultural moment might help us navigate our way out of this insanity a little bit. I wanted to read this study, just a finding from a study from the Institute for Family Studies. The study's called "Are Religious Faith and Sexual Satisfaction Mutually Exclusive or Surprisingly Mutual?" I think it was from 2019. And the study found that when it comes to relationship quality in heterosexual relationships, highly religious couples enjoy higher quality relationships and more sexual satisfaction compared to less or mixed religious couples and secular couples. In other words, the study's saying religious Christian married people have the best sex. Okay. And in fact, I think if I don't have the studies here, I've looked at the studies that show like healthy Christian marriages, actually you have the most sex. Okay. And then what happens when we pursue the ordered design for marriage and sex? Babies. That's right. Consent to sex is consent to pregnancy. In the first few weeks after a child is born, a father's biochemistry literally changes. Did you know this? His level of testosterone goes down, which makes him less aggressive. And at the same time, his levels of oxytocin rises, which creates a sense of empathy and bonding. And the baby's oxytocin rises as well. So there's a literal biochemical bond that is forged between the father and his newborn. But these benefits accrue only if the father is actively holding and playing with his baby. As one study found, They said, quote, infant contact itself seems to modulate endocrine systems and activate neural circuitry in fathers in a manner that is strikingly similar to that in mothers. And this is why Warren Farrell, in his book, The Boy Crisis, writes, when a man becomes a hands-on dad, he activates his dad brain. It's a nest of neurons that would otherwise remain dormant. In other words, like, actually sticking with the woman you impregnated, being married to her and having babies, and then like being a good dad, like this child comes out of your wife's body and then you hold the baby, like there's actual biochemical magic happening in you. Okay. And then the more you play with that baby, the more you touch them and are involved in their life, the smarter you get. Aspects of your brain are turned on that would otherwise be dormant. Okay, it's like, isn't it awesome, right? When science continues to prove the biblical truth, the biblical worldview. These biochemical phenomena obviously don't surprise us as Christians, right? They simply reaffirm the glories and goodness of God's original plan. Families. But they help explain why heterosexual monogamous cultures create the hardest working men. Okay, so I said I wanted to sort of take a stab at this answer. The why behind J.D. Unwin's observations in his 1934 book, Sex and Culture. Why is it that ultra monogamous heterosexual marriage-based cultures display the highest levels of energy and creativity, but the sexually liberated societies become dead societies, lazy, apathetic societies who can't produce or build anything? This is the beginning of an answer. When you watch your child born, and I have done this, and you hold that baby girl or baby boy, you can literally feel chemicals releasing in your brain. Like you are chemically falling in love with this little creation. Every dad listening to this knows exactly what I'm talking about. You know that there is nothing you wouldn't do for him or her. And so, shocker, you become a better worker, a better protector, a better provider than you otherwise would have been if you remained single. And I'm not saying that single men cannot be good protectors. I'm not saying single men cannot be good men. I'm saying that there are benefits to marriage for men that give us a leg up on the single guys. Yeah, I guess I'm saying that. Yeah. Like, biochemically, we are being altered in a way that the people who are not fathers are not. We will work harder. We will sacrifice more. I mean, is it starting to make sense? Like, I don't think it takes a genius to understand why studying 86 civilizations over 5,000 years show a 100% correlation between sexually monogamous marriage-based cultures and cultural advancement and cultural energy, and a 100% correlation between sexually liberated, have sex with whatever you want societies and apathy and cultural deadness, and actually someone else taking over your country. And then as a man married to a woman in an exclusive and permanent union, as they begin to have children and work harder than their single counterparts, they have a household to take care of together. Because you got a bunch of little, tiny, little insane, feral creatures running around, making a mess of everything. And they're always starving, and they're always fighting, and you have more mouths to feed, and then you have to get a bigger house. So guess what happens as you begin to follow the Genesis 1-3 cultural mandate? You have to work harder. You have no option but to work harder, unless you just become a deadbeat and peace out on your family. And guess what? Guess what? Check this one out. When a father embraces this work, with not complaining, well, I can't believe I have to clean the kitchen and do, when a father embraces this work with joy, building together with their wife, their family, guess what? He gets more sex. That's generally speaking. Researchers have found that this bears out over and over and over again. This is from John Gottman, Why Marriages Succeed or Fail. He says, quote, men who do more housework and childcare have better sex lives and get happier marriages than others. Newsweek says, men said the happier their wives were in the division of housework, the happier the men were with their sex lives. Science Daily says, couples enjoy more frequent and satisfying sex for both partners when men made a fair contribution to housework. Gender and Society says, men's performance of childcare is generally associated with more satisfaction with the division of childcare, more satisfying sexual relationships, and higher quality relationships. The Council on Contemporary Families says couples report having more and higher sexual quality when they are satisfied with their relationships. Relationship quality and stability are generally highest when couples divide up the household labor in a way they see as equitable and fair. So there's a few studies. It's like, oh, shocker. You get married and then the sex creates the babies, and then there's a bunch of them running around, and so it's like, oh my gosh, we have 2 adults instead of 1 to divide up all this work, and when you see your wife and when she sees her husband working hard and serving with joy and not just expecting the other person to do all the thing, they see that and they recognize that, and that creates a bond of love, and so then they want to have more sex, and then he is happier, so he goes out and he works harder and he's building, and massive cultural energy to build societies and civilizations. I mean, some people have said that literally everything is sex, and that some people, they misunderstand that, because it's like, are you Alfred Kinsey? No, we're not saying that you're sexual beings. That guy was a total demonic pervert, and I don't have time to get into it. I've done a whole treatment on Kinsey before on the show. It means that, like, sex is why men build. And again, people love to twist that and say, like, you're reducing men to their sexual appetites. No, I'm not. I'm saying that generally speaking, except for what Paul calls the gift of singleness, I guess, but that's the exception, right? Generally speaking, a man is going to burn with passion, and he is intended to find a wife, okay? And they're intended to unite bodily on a regular basis. And of course, everyone knows that men want it and need it more. That's just like an axiom, okay? But talk to any married couple, it's like, the more he gets, the happier he seems to be, the more he sacrificial he is. Of course, everyone needs to serve and love each other. But, like, do you see how like that, even that act is what creates babies, which forces you to work harder. Sex builds people, humans, babies, civilizations. Of course, sexually monogamous, heterosexual marriage-based cultures display the highest level of cultural creativity and energy. Of course. But first, we want to thank our sponsor of the Seth Gruber Show, Every Life Diaper Company, America's pro-life, pro-family diaper company, who actually donates, like, baby stuff to pregnancy resource centers, to disaster relief efforts, and they don't want to kill babies. That's right. Nearly every major diaper company actually supports abortion, financially or rhetorically. It's absolutely insane. So conservative Christians who have the most babies are buying their baby goods from people who would have helped murder their babies. We can't do that. If we're going to defeat woke corporatism and the culture of death, we can't fund the problem. We have to defund the problem. You can defund the problem by getting your wipes and diapers and baby shampoos, all non-toxic, at everylife.com. Everylife.com. Use promo code Seth10, Seth10 for 10% off your first order. That lets them know that we sent you. We appreciate that. And then if you do what my wife and I do, just sign up for the subscription. It gets delivered right to the house. You get as much as you need, and you don't have to make those emergency runs to Walmart. So everylife.com. Promo code Seth10. We love our friends over there. I know all of the people there, the founders. They're just amazing culture warriors, actually, as well. I think they're the fastest growing diaper company in America right now. So let's defund coterie and Huggies and the baby killing diaper companies by getting all of your baby goods from everylife.com. Thank you, Every Life. J.D. Unwin, in his book, observes the highest flourishing of culture. It's profound. one of the major points in his book is that the most powerful combination was prenuptial chastity coupled with absolute monogamy. His observation is that rationalist cultures that retained this combination for at least 3 generations exceeded all other cultures in every area, including literature, art, science, furniture, architecture, engineering, and agriculture. And in his magnum opus, this incredible study, only 3 out of the 86 cultures that were studied ever attained this level of prenuptial chastity coupled with absolute monogamy. That was the highest level of cultural energy. And of course, like, this is just the cultural mandate, right? Notice how the command to be fruitful and multiply and subdue the earth and exercise dominion is actually given to a family. Those commandments, be fruitful and multiply, subdue the earth and exercise dominion, was not given to just Adam. It was not given to just Eve. It was given to a family. The assumption is that this high level of creative energy and building will flow out of the family itself. You know, there's an interesting conversation that's sort of a sidebar, but it's very relevant to this topic. Dr. Nancy Pearcey makes this observation in her book, The Toxic War on Masculinity. And you recall, we had her on the show recently, that there is an absolute relationship with the Industrial Revolution and the breakdown of the family. Because the Industrial Revolution really, for the first time in human history, in a major way, took fathers out of the home. Most creative building was done through the family structure, Genesis 2. But now, in the machine age, men are not producing through their family goods and services and products that their family are helping create and sell, the works of their hands in the marketplace. Now he goes off to the factory and he's there all day. And there's nothing unique about him anymore, because any guy can pull down the lever, put the product on the assembly line, and screw in the bolts. You're irreplaceable. I'm sorry, you are replaceable. There's nothing unique about your skills anymore. Oh, and by the way, you're going to have to leave the house for the whole day. And for the first time in history, men were taken out of the home, like collectively, like almost simultaneously, like most men. The father left early and came back late. Do you see how so much of that creative cultural energy is taken away? Now someone might argue, well, no, Seth, it was actually the machine age and the Industrial Revolution that led to that high level of cultural energy and creativity. Because look at how much was able to be produced through the machines. Yeah, but where did that get us? Where did that get us today? Where everything has been, I don't know what the word is, mechanized. Everything is a machine. From the computer, to the phone, to automations, to software, to AI. Hundreds of thousands of dudes just aren't really needed anymore to make society run. Has that been empowering? Has that been humanizing for us? Or has that been crushing and dehumanizing? Nancy Pearcey makes this beautiful observation. She says, filling the earth starts with the family. But as extended families grow, they become clans, then tribes, then villages, then cities, and finally nations and empires. So groups have to form to address specific needs. The village needs a school, a church, a government of some kind. People come together to sell the work of their hands in the shops and marketplaces, and so on. Implied in the command to be fruitful is to develop the entire social world, all the social institutions. It also includes the rules and principles that structure those institutions, laws and policies, treaties and constitutions. In other words, it all started through a family. Really, salvation of the world came through a family. And we are saved in a physical sense, not in a salvific, not in a eternal sense. We are saved in a physical sense through the family, through labor, through building, through work. You know what I'm talking about. If you're listening to me, you know the sense of honor and joy and satisfaction when you've worked hard with the labor of your sweat and brow and hands, and you finished a product, you finished an invention, you finished a job, and it feels so good because you've reached the highest levels of being human, of what you were made to do, right? What does sexual freedom do to that high level of creativity? What does sexual liberation do to that high level of being human? It destroys it. Of course it does. There's no surprises there. What about total sexual freedom? If total sexual freedom was embraced by a culture, according to J.D. Unwin, that culture collapsed within 3 generations to the lowest state of flourishing, which Unwin describes as inert. He describes it as a dead level of conception. Isn't that interesting choice of words, conception? The beginning of something, life. A dead level of conception. And is characterized by people who have little interest in much else other than their own wants and needs. According to J.D. Unwin, at this level, the culture is usually conquered or taken over by another culture with greater social energy. I'm just going to say it. Islam. You know exactly what I mean, don't you? Are the Muslims are they murdering their babies through abortion? Not really. Do they tolerate the LGBTQ mob, the drag queens and men in lingerie dancing for their kids? Nope. Do they have a high level of divorce and a low level of reproduction? Nope. They have a low level of divorce and a high level of reproduction. But Andrew Cedra told you on this show, what's the most common name in the UK in London right now? The most common baby name, Muhammad. I just saw footage a few days ago out of, what is it, guys? Is it Dearborn, Michigan? I thought I was looking at a different country. It was guys beating their chests and singing in a different language, reading religious texts. It wasn't Christianity, I'll tell you that. If we continue down this road of radical sexual libertinism, just anchored in nothing, just like absolute freedom, if it feels good, do it. According to J.D. Unwin, studying 86 civilizations over 5,000 years, that culture is usually conquered or taken over by another culture with greater social energy. And how does a culture get greater social energy, according to J.D. Unwin? The highest level of cultural energy is the coupling of prenuptial chastity with absolute monogamy. Oh, but I don't like that, Seth. You're a Christian. You're a bigot. I don't like this little reel I just saw of you telling people that they shouldn't be able to have premarital sex. They shouldn't be able to have gay marriages. I don't care. That's what history teaches us. You don't have to like it. It's simply the fact. So where are we? Where are we then? J.D. Unwin writes, we must always remember that the social energy which is displayed at any time by any society depends not only upon the sexual opportunity it enjoys, but also upon that enjoyed by the 2 preceding generations. He says it takes at least 3 generations for an extension or a limitation of sexual opportunity to have its full cultural effect. So what he means is, like, if you pursue a path of absolute monogamy, you're going to see the fullest effects of that in 3 generations if that continues. Simultaneously, if you pursue radical sexual freedom uninterrupted for 3 generations, then you'll see the fullest effect of those choices in a culture, in a society. He says, and if we happen to observe a society which is beginning or has just begun to extend its sexual opportunity, the full effects of that change have not yet been felt. The society still displays an energy which corresponds in some part to its old regulations. So what does that mean? It means that the first 15 or 20 years after the real onslaught of the sexual revolution didn't even show you anywhere of how bad those choices could get for a society. It's 3 generations later, after the onset of those choices, that you see its fullest manifestation. Does that make sense? He talks about a time lag in his book. If there is a change in sexual constraints, either increased or decreased, the full effect of that change is not realized until the 3rd generation. So, I mean, again, like, no one's been able to really in any meaningful way, like, discredit or debunk or discount Unwin's observations in 1934 in Sex and Culture. If this is true, I think right now with me, you're probably being like, oh my gosh, because it's 91 years later. Where are we? Well, between the 1960s and 1970s, a wave of states, starting with Illinois in 1961, repealed their sodomy laws. Pennsylvania repealed its adultery laws in 1973, including premarital sex. That's interesting, right? Same year as Roe v. Wade. Did you know that Pennsylvania was the first state to repeal its adultery laws? That's right. It used to be illegal to get divorced. Like, that wasn't just a covenant before God. That was your promise to society that you were not going to get divorced. So, or cheat on your spouse, right? So Pennsylvania repealed its adultery laws in 1973, repealed its laws against fornication. By the mid 20th century, so 1950s, 1960s, many states had abandoned or simply stopped enforcing their fornication statutes. This has been a long time coming. What does it go, by the way? Is it boomers, Gen X? I might have skipped one. Millennials, now Gen Z. Like, okay, yeah, okay, wait a second. We're several generations since all of this insanity. But by the way, I believe the way he defines a generation, because he wrote this in 1934. So the way he defines a generation, I think, is 30-year periods. It's not necessarily the specific markers we've given to the last few generations, because it was written so long ago. So anyways, even still, right? We're 91 years hence, which means we're basically smack dab 3 generations later from the onset of some of this stuff. A lot of the decaying moral values and changes in our laws, we're seeing seeds of that even in the 40s and 50s. So best case scenario, we'll see the fullest manifestation of the sexual revolutionary path in the 2030s, maybe the 2040s. That should frighten you, because the end of that train is that society gets conquered by another civilization displaying greater social energy, which means that they're more monogamous. Okay. I mean, it's insane to think about the state of our civilization right now. You know, the average age of exposure to pornography is like now 8 years old. It was literally just the late 90s and early 2000s where if a young man, a young boy wanted to go look at images, he had to stumble upon his dad's Playboys in the garage or in the closet, or his friend said his uncle had it under the bed, or he lied about his age or something to get into a strip club. Like, it wasn't everywhere, and it wasn't always in your face. Now it is. We have created at least 2 generations of young men to satisfy their urges whenever they want. All they have to do is just open their iPhone. what J.D. Unwin is saying is societies that go that direction become inert, dead. They produce nothing, lazy, fat, apathetic. All they care about is pleasing their own desires. But we've had that coming for some time now. Guys, it's time to stop sitting on the sidelines. The American revival we're experiencing needs you and your unapologetic voice. Mark your calendar to join us for our second annual Life or Death Con in Washington, D.C. on January 22nd, 2026. January 22nd, 2026. It's a one-day charge to awaken, equip, and send out believers who are ready to make a real difference in culture. Do you sense that the harvest is ripe? Come on. For too long, the church has watched from a distance while the battle rages because we were just doing our Bible studies. But the tide is turning, and your voice, your courage, and your leadership are essential to what's coming next. These are exciting times to be alive. We are bringing out the boldest Christian leaders to lead you into the culture war with wisdom and clarity. Steve Dace, oh my gosh, we have to protect that man. He's a hero. Megan Basham, Abby Johnson, Dr. George Grant, AJ Hurley, and more. Then the very next day in DC, march shoulder to shoulder with us at the White Rose Resistance at the March for Life on January 23rd. Get your tickets now for Life or Death Con at lifeordeathcon.com and use code Seth, S-E-T-H, my first name, for 20% off your ticket, okay, while the discount lasts. See you in Washington, D.C. on January 22nd, 2026. Life or Death Con, baby. Let's go. You know, a lot of this is just biblical. It's biblical that you become what you behold. I'll give you one example. 2 Corinthians 3:18 states, and we all with unveiled faces, beholding the glory of the Lord, are being transformed into the same image from one degree of glory to another. We're being transformed into the same image of what? Of the thing we're beholding, which in this case is the glory of the Lord. You become what you behold. If you behold your wife and your family, if you behold your Savior, if you behold your family and you love them, you're being transformed into the same image. You're becoming a better father, a better husband, a better provider, a better sacrificer. If you behold porn and filth, if you behold abortion, if you behold human sacrifice, if you behold absolute deadness, you become dead. It's like not complicated, guys. And by the way, I've said this on the show before, and you know, our our funny friends over at Right Wing Watch lost their minds. But there's a reason why the most vociferous, loudest cheerleaders for abortion are fat and ugly. They've become what they've beheld for years. They've celebrated, cheered, worshiped at the altar of abortion. Been escorts, whispering mothers into the clinic to have their children ripped out of their uterus. Of course, the loudest apologists for abortion are fat and ugly. Abortion is ugly. You become what you behold. If you behold sexual libertinism, if you behold images and videos that is just absolute insane unmoored sexual appetite, you will become an absolute insane sexually carnivorous hungry demon, and you will care about nothing but yourself. And maybe the libertarians say that's a good idea. To each his own. We can't control people. No, because then you lose your civilization. You lose your society forever. By the way, I was fascinated by Stephen Miller's comments at the Charlie Kirk Memorial, which I haven't had a chance to fully process on this show with you. But it was fascinating. It was absolutely fascinating. I mean, he was like the most unempathetic, like steel-faced, like cross me and I'll kill you kind of facial expressions. And a lot of people were turned off by the talk because they were like, oh my gosh, like that guy, it looks so deadly. But he's the White House Deputy Chief of Staff for policy in the United States Homeland Security Advisor. And but actually, like, his talk made a lot of good points. Here's a segment of it that I thought it was the most powerful, talking about what's happened since these people assassinated, martyred Charlie Kirk. And his comments about these people are exactly the kind of people I'm describing, actually. He says they cannot imagine what they have awakened. They cannot conceive of the army that they have arisen in all of us, because we stand for what is good, what is virtuous, what is noble. And to those trying to incite violence against us, those trying to foment hatred against us, what do you have? And I'm telling you, I watched this live. It was so gnarly. He's like, you have nothing. You are nothing. You are wickedness. You are jealousy. You are envy. You are hatred. You are nothing. You can build nothing. You can produce nothing. You can create nothing. We are the ones who build. We are the ones who create. We are the ones who lift up humanity. There you go. That was a segment of it. But actually, do you see? That's kind of what I'm saying. Like, who are the people who are celebrating the absolute assassination and murder of Charlie? Trans, furry, porn leftists who dress up as little squirrels. Those people can build nothing. They can produce nothing. They're inert and dead. That's where societies go to die. Once you start worshiping animals, your society's done. Chesterton, prophetic once again. Wherever there is animal worship, there will be human sacrifice. When we get the Genesis 2 and Genesis 3 order wrong, they begin to worship the creation rather than the creator, right? You get that twisted, like that's one of the signs. Talk about like reading the signs of the times, right? You know, like Jill Pole in The Silver Chair. Go to Narnia, free the prince, break the spell, free the land. But remember the signs. Remember the signs, says Aslan. Say them to yourself when you wake in the morning and when you lay down at night, when you wake in the middle of the night. Say them to yourself. Don't miss the signs or you're going to screw up your job. We are missing the signs of the times in 2025. And one of those signs is, when you get off on having sex with a man dressed as a squirrel who's transitioning to a woman, sign, your society's on life support, sign, stop. Don't go any farther. There's a cultural cliff, and when you go off, you're done. J.D. Unwin says, in the records of history, indeed, there is no example of a society displaying great energy for any appreciable period unless it has been absolutely monogamous. That is such a gnarly observation. Listen to that line again. In the records of history, there is not one example of a society displaying great energy for any appreciable period unless it has been absolutely monogamous. In other words, it's almost like you could say, you should want Christian nationalism, even if you're not following Christ, for selfish reasons to preserve the civilization that you've taken for granted and don't have enough testicular fortitude to step up and defend for yourselves and your children. He says, moreover, I do not know of a case in which an absolutely monogamous society has failed to display great energy. And again, what was I saying? Why are absolutely monogamous heterosexual cultures so energetic? Because I've made the decisions that have led to that kind of energy. Marry a woman, be faithful, don't cheat on her, have children, work hard. Your biochemical neurons are changing because you're having and holding these children, and it makes you want to crush everything. Like, there are actually metaphysical, spiritual, and biological reasons why all of J.D. Unwin's observations make a lot of sense. He said, in the past, different societies have risen up in different parts of the earth. They've flourished greatly, and then they've declined. In every case, the society started its historical career in a state of absolute monogamy. manifested great energy while it preserved its austere regulations, and relaxed after a less rigorous tradition had been inherited by a complete new generation. I freak out when I see all of the comparisons between American culture right now in 2025 and the years preceding the fall of the Roman Empire. It's humbling, it's scary, it's shocking, but perhaps not surprising. Edward Gibbon, in his multi-volume, I mean, you could kill someone with these books, they're so large, Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire. He notes 5 attributes that marked Rome at its end, right before its fall. First, he says it was a mounting love of show and luxury, so call it affluence. Second, a widening gap between the very rich and the very poor. Third, an obsession with sex. Fourth, freakishness in the arts. Freakishness in the arts masquerading as originality. Dee-doo. Ring a bell? Hey, look at my art piece. It's a toilet with a banana in it, and I stuck it to a wall. Who wants to spend $1 million on it? Now, you've seen the freakishness in the arts for some time, haven't you? And they're all like, it's so, I threw a paint bucket on the wall. You want to buy it for $1 million? And lastly, an increased desire to live off the state. Why does it all sound so familiar? Francis Schaeffer writes, as the empire ground down, the decadent Romans were given to a thirst for violence and a gratification of the senses. This is especially evident in their rampant sexuality. For example, in Pompeii, a century or so after the Republic had become a thing of the past, the phallus cult was strong. Lovely. Statues and paintings of exaggerated sexuality adorned the houses of the more affluent. Not all the art in Pompeii was like this, but the sexual representations were unabashedly blatant. Okay, so the phallus cult, that's penises. Okay, that's male genitals. And there was literally a phallus cult. I don't know. I look at the radical LGBTQ LMNOP mob today, and that's the phallus cult. They're literally obsessed with. Sorry, I've told you before not to listen to this show in the car with your kids. They are obsessed with helping women who want to be men shave tons of skin off of their arm, like stripping all of the skin off to create surgically altered phalluses. Like, I don't know how much more demonic you can get. Self-mutilation to give yourself genitals you weren't born with because you're obsessed with getting off pretending you're the other gender. Like, that's happening, guys. Obsession with sex, freakishness in the arts. By the way, speaking of obsession with male genitals, do you remember just a few years ago, do you remember when Notre Dame, the cathedral in Paris, like a bunch of it burned? Do you remember that? Well, Brigitte Macron, who is definitely a man, for sure a man, who they call the First Lady of France, because Emmanuel Macron is the prime minister. But I'm telling you that's a gay marriage. Those are dudes. Brigitte, we're supposed to call him, literally proposed this. You're gonna think I'm insane. Maybe we'll pull up the graphic. This was a whole news piece at the time. Brigitte Macron, who's is a dude married to the Prime Minister of France, requested that a phallus with golden balls be placed in the partially reconstructed Notre Dame Cathedral. Literally, let's rebuild the church with a penis on top. Like, okay, and you're saying, you're the Seth, that's inappropriate. You're like, this is out of line. No. D-do. Warning. Fall of the Roman Empire, obsession with phalluses everywhere. The cultural cliff is right there. We're about to go off it. Wake the hell up. Oh, but Trump's president. He's going to withhold all this stuff. Yeah, we can withhold some wickedness for a time being, but eventually it's all going to come back unless the church wakes up. Or consider the pussy hats from the radical feminists. Sorry, that's what they called it. That's what they called their hats that they put on their heads during the women's marches and all that. That is what they called them. They put them on their heads. Hey, genitals on my head. Oh, we're going to stick it to the patriarchy. Obsession with genitals. Dee-doo. Schaeffer continues, says, apathy was the chief mark of the late empire. What's J.D. Unwin's observations? Inert, apathetic, cultural deadness is where sexually liberated societies go. And then the last thing that happens is they're taken over by other societies with greater social energy, who usually that means they're monogamous. Islam, trying to warn you. Okay. He says one of the ways the apathy showed itself was in a lack of creativity in the arts. One easily observed examples of the decadence of officially sponsored art is that the 4th century work of the Arch of Constantine in Rome stands in poor contrast to its 2nd century sculptures, which were borrowed from monuments from the period of Emperor Trajan. The elite abandoned their intellectual pursuits for social life. Officially sponsored art was decadent and music was increasingly bombastic. Even the portraits on the coins became of poor quality. All of life was marked by the predominant apathy. Sexual liberation leads to inertness, apathy, and deadness. What about sexual constraints? According to J.D. Unwin, increased sexual constraints, either pre or post-nuptial, always led to increased flourishing of a culture. Conversely, increased sexual freedom always led to the collapse of a culture 3 generations later, which means that you can reverse the trend if you hold it. But if we continue down the trajectory we've been going down, it's all over. And maybe not in our immediate lifetime. Maybe some of you are 50 years old and maybe you're going to pass before this happens. But I'm telling you, it will happen if nothing changes. And I have all of history as my argument. And of course, this is why the radical left has always made dismantling, deconstructing, and attacking the family as their highest priority. Because that's where all that creative social energy flows out of. That's Genesis 2. In the family, reproduce, subdue the earth, exercise dominion. And I've already given you my cultural, personal, spiritual, and biological observations and arguments as to why that's so. So, of course, deconstruct the family, destroy society. And that's not just like my opinion either. There's this pro-gay research fellow named Stanley Kurtz at the Hoover Institute. It's a think tank on the campus of Stanford. So he supports the gays' right to do weird sex stuff and to call themselves married. Like he's on the other side. He's not with us. And he believed years before gay marriage happened, years before Obergefell, that gay marriage would destroy marriage as we know it. He said, marriage is a critical social institution. Stable families depend on it. Society depends on stable families. Marriage means monogamy. Gay marriage will break that connection. It will do this by itself and by leading to polygamy and polyamory. What lies beyond gay marriage is no marriage at all, end quote. What about LGBT academic and revolutionary Paula Edelbrick? Here's what she said. Being queer is more than setting up house, sleeping with a person of the same gender, and seeking state approval for doing so. Being queer means pushing the parameters of sex, sexuality, and the family. And in the process, transforming the very fabric of society. I mean, we could do these, okay, for hours. The admissions from the revolutionaries who have laid siege to the foundations of Western civilization, who wanted to usher in crazy, laissez-faire sex. We could go through these for hours. The agenda was always blatantly obvious. Break the foundations, that's the family, and what can the righteous do? Well, it's about time we start rebuilding them, because we don't have a lot of time left, frankly. But there's always hope. It's been incredible to watch what seems to be a revival breaking out in America from Sunday, September 21st at the Charlie Kirk Memorial. The largest presentation of the gospel to the largest audience in human history. Over 100 million views online. Over 230,000 people in person. And every politician acknowledging the kingship of Jesus Christ and basically telling people to give their lives to him and repent. Tucker Carlson's talk was literally, you need to repent. I need to repent. I'm the problem with society. You're the problem with society. We need to repent. Absolutely incredible. Speaker after speaker after speaker after speaker. There's hope. We may be living in the midst of the beginning of a new revival in America. And these trends can be reversed. When you get back to the foundations, which whether you like it or not, those foundations of Western civilization, it's the biblical worldview. It's Christianity, like it or not. That's just fact. If you return to that and you reverse the trends and you continue to live upright and holy lives, absolutely monogamous, centered around the family, you display great social energy and your society continues. That's what 5,000 years and 86 civilizations testify to. Hope springs eternal from the human breast. A society cannot be sexually liberated and free and also endure. You cannot have liberalism, laissez-faire sex attitudes, and also have culturally creative energy. It's one or the other. Oh, but no, I want my cake and I want to eat it too. I want all the porn and all the sex stuff, but I want Make America Great Again. It's not how it works. I want a Tommy Lahren pro-abortion conservatism and laissez-faire sex attitudes, and I want a MAGA, baby. You can't. You got to pick. It's just like Christian nationalism or secular globalism. You can only have one. History stands as an indictment to all of our choices recently. I think crazy sexual revolutionary libs who hate the God that they say doesn't exist should want Christian nationalism because that's the only way to make sure that there is a civilization for your children and grandchildren to inherit. Absolute monogamy, marriage-based cultures, you get to continue. Crazy sexually free, have sex with whatever looks good, you lose your society. Where do we go from here? How should we then live? As always at the White Rose Resistance, we say we need to make the local church great again. Everything is discipleship. Discipleship is inevitable. You're either going to be discipled by the shows you watch, the music you listen to, the friends you hang out with, and the porn you watch, or you're going to be discipled by the church you go to, the Bible you read, and the friends you surround yourself with. You're either going to be discipled towards libertinism and licentiousness, or you're going to be discipled into virtuousness, And eventually, you're not going to find that virtuousness and that freedom in Mormonism, in Islam, in Judaism. You're only going to find it in Christianity. The risen king who predicted and pulled off his own resurrection. And the resurrection means that the physical world matters to God. And so it ought to matter to God's people. So which way, Christian man? Which way, Christian woman? The cultural cliff is right there. We've got 20 to 40 years. 20 to 40 years, if nothing changes, and we go off the cliff. And that's bye-bye. Bye-bye, America. Bye-bye, last best hope of man on earth. If America falls, freedom and liberty as we know it around the world falls. I'm not prioritizing my country before the kingdom of God. I'm saying for the sake of our country and for the sake of the proclamation of the kingdom of God around the country, we need to get this right here on our soil, in our land. If you guys want to support what we're doing to stop this trend, to awaken the local church, to end abortion, to disciple the next generation, to stand for righteousness, to stand for life, to get believers elected, to stop the momentum of the sexual revolution, to establish righteousness in our cities, our communities, our counties, go to thewhiterose.life. We're launching resistance chapters all around the country to mobilize and inspire the local church to do this work. Go to thewhiterose.life, sign up as an ally at $35 a month. We'll send you your battle box, all that you need on our app. You can take courses, curriculum, live calls with us. We're here to serve you, okay? Go screen the movie, The 1916 Project, in your church, to your youth group. You can go to the1916project.com, start that kind of discipleship and training. We're here to serve you. Now go out there and give them heaven. Until next week, I'm Seth Gruber, and this is The Seth Gruber Show.